are spending a small part of your day. And we'll go ahead and jump right in. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the provider updates and training. We've got a lot of great stuff on here today for you. I'm going to skim through. If you have any questions, let me know, or I'm always available, after the meeting. Feel free to obviously reach out anytime. I'm always happy to help with anything. So P&M, I know we've talked a whole lot about P&M in the last, several months. That did launch October 1st. So that is up and running. That is kind of that new entry point into PSM, which is through DoDD. So essentially, anything that you would have done in PSM, that's your certification, recertification, if you have to ever add services, if you're needing to update your contact information, all that kind of good stuff. You'll initially have to go through P&M. So it's a new kind of login point through ODM. So that's kind of what this whole new interface is. So you log in through P&M, put a little bit of demographic information in, and it's going to kind of shift you right back over to PSM. Finally, I'm very happy to say down here that there's training available. So they just released the training. So right here, if you see on the agenda, it has a link on their website. A lot of great material. I've looked through it. It's going to really step by step take you through how you log in there, what you need to do to get to, make those updates. So definitely utilize that. But again, by all means, if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to me on that in regards to P&M. Moving along, the provider portal, we are very excited to announce that's going to have a new look and some really cool new features in it coming very soon. So just to give you a heads up, we're still kind of working through, some of that stuff with IT. We're hoping for like an early December launch. So we'll send an email to everyone that's active in that portal closer to that time. And some of the new features you'll see in there is the providers will have a dashboard now. So you'll be able to track and see what all you have applied for in the past and kind of see your history, which is really cool. Also, for agency providers, you'll be able to add users. So you'll have that ability to add multiple users, which you currently can't do in the current portal. So a lot of cool things coming with that very soon. But again, we'll send that email out with instructions on kind of that transition over when that time comes. And then our local COG actually conducted they're doing a provider survey in regards to respite care. So we can kind of hopefully expand our efforts with, respite in our county and how we're doing that. So if you guys have a chance and have time, the link is right there to take that survey. We'd really appreciate it. Also, we just kind of found out this is very recent, so I kind of threw this on last minute on the agenda, but there are COVID test kits available. We got quite a few in very recently. So if you need any, definitely reach out either to the individual's SSA to request those, or you can email myself there at my email address on the agenda. We do have some in our office in Hamilton for pickup if you need those. And here we've got a lot of great trainings on this one. So I'll kind of skim through these. There is an MI-IDD training series that DoDD and Mental Health and Addiction Services are hosting. So you can kind of see the different training sessions they have, the times, and then there are links there to register if you're interested in those. Also EVV, so that's that electronic visit verification, kind of like time card for providers. They are diving a little deeper. They're doing some in-depth trainings, and that is ran through SAN-Data. So I wanted to make sure you guys had that in case you are interested in those. It will go through the topics here, and then they have several dates where you can register to attend those if you feel that would be helpful for you. Down here at the bottom is the link on how you would register to get set up with those trainings. I know we've talked a little bit in the past about that update to the behavior support workshop, that rule that just came out. So there are workshops they're conducting statewide. I have been a part of a lot of those, and they are extremely beneficial and helpful. I highly recommend them. They're for everybody. So even though this says Northern Ohio, like anyone can attend these virtually. So that one is coming up December 2nd. Link, that's kind of a long link there to register for that one. And just as a reminder, I know we've talked about this before, but on their website, they have a wonderful section devoted to behavior supports, and they have a lot of great updated resources and material there that you can find. Similarly, talking with that, they have also created a really nice flow chart. I will make sure that's dropped into the meeting minutes for you guys. If you ever question if a medication is a chemical restraint or not, this flow chart is wonderful. It's going to kind of talk you through and let you know if it falls into that category or not. So that will be in the meeting minutes. And then also DODD has a great opportunity for all residential providers who are interested in kind of building your tech and using that and utilizing that. So you get to work with a subject matter expert and really try to kind of build that within your agency. So they are seeking applications for that. And again, the registration link is there too for you. And then the Great Leadership Academy trainings that always occur, those are coming up. There are 2 on December 7th. They are in person due to kind of the content of the sessions. Both flyers will be in those meeting minutes. They're going to have the dates, the times, and then how you register on the flyers. They are open to all providers on both sessions. And then lastly, there is a regional meeting for DSPs. This is a great chance for all the DSPs to kind of convene and come together and talk about their experience, whether that be needs, hopes, fears, like really what it looks like to be a DSP. So this really is a great opportunity for the DSPs to kind of convene and take part in this. And there is one specific to Butler County. You'll see down here on the date, it's at the Butler County ESC. And then also the registration link is there for you as well. And then lastly, I did throw on the 2023. I'm crazy to say that, but those meetings are listed there for you. We are going to switch the time around. So we're going to do a 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and kind of see how that works for everybody. So just as an FYI, I'll send out, make sure that I remember to send that out in January as a reminder. That's a new time. So with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing here. If there are no questions on any of that, we'll go ahead and just jump right into the presentations that we have. So we have the wonderful ladies with us with Family Focus to talk about, some resources and material that they can share with our providers. So whenever you guys are ready.
I'm Dina Barrett. I am an early intervention and family focus team supervisor. And I just want to introduce Marjorie Baker and Lisa Tyree because they wanted to share some great information with you.
Okay. So thank you so much for having us. We won't take up too much of your time, but we wanted to just reach out to providers and kind of get the word out. Family Focus, historically, we were serving individuals in their homes with their families, but we are opening up our supports to providers and individuals who are living in residential settings. So what do we do? So we look at daily routines and we try to improve the daily routine using basically environmental supports through visual schedules, daily schedules, some social stories, really anything that can be identified by a team or a provider to help improve the daily expectations and help individuals know what's happening in their lives.
And then we've got, so I'm going to screen share, Amy. I don't do this often, so we'll see if I can do it. There it is. We're going to see how it goes. I've got some examples.
While she's looking for that.
Try.
Yeah, while she's looking for that. So some examples would be if someone is moving to a new home, it would be really good for them to have perhaps a social story about the move that can really reduce anxiety. And I think another like really important thing to think about is that when we think about visual supports, we always think about them for kids, but really adults need those pictures throughout their lifespan.
Well, it was there, wasn't it? And now it's gone.
It was there for 1 minute.
Oh, I got a second. Okay, let's try it again. I put them on my desktop. So this is just a basic example of a daily schedule for someone. this is something that we use quite frequently with families, and we thought it might be really beneficial for folks in like supported living settings, because it can show them like each month when payday is. We always talk about pizza nights, really important for people, and maybe when their activities are scheduled or doctor's appointments. So this is something that could be used each month and changed out. Oh, sorry, guys. This is not I don't do lots of Zoom presentations. Oh, this is also an example from the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center. We also have some basic personal hygiene and human development courses or like activities. And so this is just an example of one of them for personal hygiene.
Then I think we have one more.
Yeah.
Yep. So if providers or direct care staff are struggling with chores or even just the independence, a lot of these visuals, we can just work with a team to identify what's needed, and then we're more than happy to make it. We've done all kinds of visuals to help increase independence and communication. Sometimes it can be a choice board, or sometimes it can be that someone had a box of ice cream sandwiches and there are, 5 in a box. And so we can make a visual for each one. And then when you eat one, you're taking one away. So that can help a person really understand, oh, okay, like this is what I have for the week. And when it's gone kind of thing. So it can support, I think, direct care staff as well.
And that's kind of it. So if
That's
anybody
it.
has interest, we talked about having people reach out to Amy, and then Amy will reach out to us. That way she can track people's interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the meeting minutes, there is going to be a flyer. I think that was also included with the reminders for the provider meeting, but it will have that provider desk, help desk email where to send if there is interest. Definitely utilize this. This is such a great resource, and we're excited for this. It's for all providers. I mean, day programming, residential independence, definitely reach out if you guys have questions or have any interest in this.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. Okay, and then next up, we have Michelle Truitt and Kathy Talon, who are our QA nurses, to talk about some health information and updates.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy, and Michelle's on here too. I think more of you know Michelle probably because she tends to work with the teams a little more, but I have the pleasure today of talking about the really enticing topic of constipation and bowel obstruction. So once that's introduced, everybody will probably be like, we need to take a break to go to the bathroom or whatever. But anyway, the reason why that we are talking about it today, though, is because in our MUI stakeholders meeting, that's where we meet to talk about patterns and trends with MUIs and so forth, bowel obstruction tends to still be a frequent reason for unanticipated hospitalization with individuals. It's also still one of the top causes of death with people with disabilities that's a preventable cause. So I'm going to try also to screen share and cross your fingers that this will work. Okay, and share. Okay, is everybody seeing it?
Yep.
Yep, it's there. Okay. Oh my goodness. I don't think I've ever been successful with that quickly. So anyway, the learning curve must be getting better. And but anyways, so I just said that it's one of the most common causes of preventable death. It's also listed in the top fatal 5, which is not a good thing to be in. So the fatal 5 is identified as the top 5 reasons people with disabilities end up dying. And bowel obstruction for years has remained in that fatal 5. Again, it is preventable. People with disabilities are more prone to constipation and bowel obstruction for a lot of reasons, but some of them can be just mobility issues, not eating enough fiber, not drinking enough, and some of their just conditions with positioning can also contribute to problems with constipation. Most of our folks, they're on more medications than our average for the whole population. And many of those drugs, about 1/3 of drugs that people with disabilities take are what's called anticholinergics, which basically just means they dry things out. So the medications themselves that people need to treat other conditions are also contributing to constipation and then bowel obstructions. Once a person has a bowel obstruction, they are very likely to have another one. So scar tissue develops very quickly in the bowel. And so one obstruction causes this buildup of scar tissue, which then will contribute to another bowel obstruction down the road. So for SSAs that are on the meeting and providers.
It's on mute, but you can hit those two to stop it.
Okay. So people on teams, if a person has been admitted to the hospital with a bowel obstruction, I would definitely consider that as a risk to be included in the plan and to come up with strategies to prevent that from happening again. Things like bowel monitoring. And that always feels like when I do home visits and things, it's like, yeah, we track it, but not always understanding the real importance of that. So for example, many people have an order for a PRN laxative if they don't have a bowel movement in 3 days or 2 days. And it's really common to find that there can be a whole string of days and people are still recording those bowel movements, but that they're not having them, but then they're not giving that PRN medication that the person has an order for. So I think it's just reminding people to learn what a person's baseline is, what's constipation for them, and knowing what kinds of medications they have available and using them according to the parameters of when people should use them. So there's some, on this page, there's some common causes of constipation, which I think I already talked about. It is important too, before I forget, that sometimes people that have a partial bowel obstruction actually will have diarrhea. And that can really throw people because they think there's no way that they're constipated or have some kind of an obstruction, but really they're having diarrhea because it's trying to push that hard fecal matter out of the colon. So some signs and symptoms, you have to be really careful because sometimes the signs and symptoms really just mimic the flu. So during flu season, if you have somebody high risk in this area, it's really being aware that possibly a bowel obstruction may be starting. So just being extra vigilant during that time. Also, many times we will see people, and I know Michelle had someone with this not too long ago, I think, that they were having a lot of trouble with urinating, but it was actually a bowel impaction that was causing that because it was creating pressure on the bladder that wasn't allowing the urine to pass. So sometimes people will have, they stop eating as well as they normally do. Their abdomens can look big and bloated. They may have cramps or abdominal pain. Vomiting, especially repeated vomiting, is often a sign that happens when there is a bowel obstruction. And increased behavioral symptoms. So lots of symptoms to kind of look for, but really it's kind of knowing if you're providing supports for someone, knowing what their norm is, and then intervening whenever it's indicated. Let's see. So some things, we talk about increasing fiber in the diet all the time. Does anybody really know what that means or how to do it? Sometimes our diet where we don't eat a lot of whole grains, raw fruits and vegetables. People tend to think of cereal or bread, and those are all good things. But it's just trying to get more of that into a person's diet on a routine basis that can help with constipation. Drinking enough water. Water definitely lubricates everything in the body. So a big portion of our body is made up of water. So we really need that to keep things moving the way they should. Lots of people like coffee, tea, soda, alcoholic beverages, and those, they can count for some fluid, but really the caffeine in those tend to dehydrate the body. Alcohol tends to work as a water pill. If you've ever drank a lot of beer, you probably know that because you're up going to the bathroom more often. So that's because it is a water pill for your body. Helping people take enough time to be in the bathroom, to not rush people, having kind of a normal toileting routine exercise, even changing positioning for a person who is pretty immobile, even changing their position can help help stimulate the colon. If you suspect that there is anything with the bowel going on, then definitely seeking medical attention. I was recently out to do a home visit, and when I got there, the individual was gone, and they said he was at the emergency room, and he had been taken to the emergency room for some swelling in his leg, but he actually ended up he had a full bowel obstruction and had emergency surgery that night. So, you just never know. He was acting kind of odd, but that was really all that was really going on with him. There's also on the DODD website, it's called the Well-Informed Newsletter. It kind of looks like this. And there are actually several well-informed newsletters that are really beneficial. This is from 2017, but all of the information is still, really relevant. So I think that that's all that I have to say, unless anybody has questions. And I wanted to just remind you guys that Michelle and I are always here. We're more than happy to help you answer questions, provide any assistance that we can. So please feel free to reach out to us. Okay, anybody? Okay, well, hopefully
job,
next time I talk
Kathy.
to you, it will be something that's not, quote, embarrassing. So take care, everybody.
Thank you, Kathy. We appreciate it. It's a lot of great, helpful information to always kind of keep in mind and be cognizant of. We will have all those flyers and the meeting minutes as well, what she went over. And then lastly, we have Robin Thomas with our SWOCOG with us to talk about compliance tool updates. And Robin, we always appreciate when you join us, and we always love your expertise. So thanks for being with us.
Okay, well, thank you, Amy. I have a lot of information to go over. I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as I can, so that I don't keep you here all afternoon, but I will do my best to get through it. Let me pull up my PowerPoint and try to share that as well. Bear with me 1 second. Of course, it's not letting me do the way I want to. There we go. Okay. So the, can everybody see that? Okay. So the compliance tool was updated. Generally, it's updated twice a year. And so the updates were effective the beginning of this month. So I'm going to go over some of those changes. And then I have a little bit of additional information I'm going to cover at the end of my PowerPoint. So let's jump in. Several questions have been updated just with rule changes, so I'm not going to go over those, but they're just changes to the rule reference. If a rule changed, that it's in reference to, or when they've been updating the rules and taking out the chapter 2 reference, I'm not going to go over those changes because they don't make a huge difference. But the first change is in the guidance that you'll see in the review tool. And this one has to do with restrictive measures, and it talks about mainly about the blunt suppression for behavior supports if someone has chemical restraint. So there's been a lot of training and discussion about this, so I'm not going to read through all of this for you. Amy does have the PowerPoint and she's going to send it out. But it just gives the explanation of what has to be reviewed and talked about for chemical restraints with blunt suppression. And it does take out about criminal court orders not requiring HRC approval. That is different now in the behavior support rule, because there are times that those orders may actually require HRC approval at this point. Again, this is about restrictive measures. The same kind of discussion about blunt suppression. It includes a little bit more information about rights restrictions, additional information about limitations relating to technology or community. That those are examples of restrictive measures. There was a change in the question about if a service plan includes timeout or manual or mechanical restraint, are those interventions implemented only when there's risk of harm? So there was just some change in that question. Here is a new question about if the service plan includes chemical restraint, are the interventions being implemented only when risk of harm is evidenced, or when an individual engages in a precisely defined pattern of behavior that is very likely to result in risk of harm? And again, it has all of the information about in the guidance about blunt suppression and what that means if there's chemical restraint, but making sure that any kind of chemical restraint is only used when there is risk of harm or that pattern of behavior. So that is a new question for both agency providers and independent providers. This question actually has information in it about notifying a guardian if there's a chemical restraint, a manual restraint, or timeout. So this is new in the rule about making sure that guardians are notified when those restraints are used. Here's another new question for agency and independent providers about the provider sharing the record of the restrictive measures with the individual or the guardian and the team whenever the behavior support strategy is being reviewed or reconsidered. This is change in the guidance about, this is the documentation section of the tool. And this is talking about how billing forms, it used to say billing forms are not acceptable. Now the terminology is claims for payment a provider submits for services is not considered service documentation. So they just wanted to clarify the guidance in this information, and that is in 3 separate questions in the documentation section of the tool. And again, this one is giving guidance again about the claims for payment not being considered service documentation, and then further clarification about number of units or continuous amount of uninterrupted time. I know because I have cited providers on this, the way that the rule is written for services that require units as part of documentation, the rule says number of units or continuous amount of uninterrupted time. So they wanted to clarify that you can put number of units or continuous amount of time. So if a provider is not specifically putting the number of 15-minute units, and maybe is just putting the number of hours that they are working, that is acceptable as well. So that's the interpretation, and this guidance is basically trying to show that. Here's some changes. All of those previous changes were specific to, were to agency and independent providers. These are some things specific to agencies. This one is regarding waiver nursing delegation, some guidance for doing the scope of services, making sure that for waiver nursing delegation, the documentation has to include the name of the unlicensed person for whom a supervisory visit was performed. So if any of you do waiver nursing, and you're doing that delegation, making sure the staff person's name is in that visit information. A new agency question regarding adult day service or vocational habilitation, making sure the conditions for virtual support are met, and information about what's not included in virtual support. So it is giving information about that service. A new question, again, this is about employment providers, about submitting the outcome data through the went through that too quick, outcome tracking system, making sure that information is included and that data was submitted. And then here are some personnel questions with lots of clarification, particularly around some of the things that were waived or changed during COVID. And it has clarification on dates. This one has to do particularly with database things, making sure providers understand that using the ARCS system, the SAM database, I believe is still not being picked up through the ARCS system. So that has to be run separately. And then some of the database checks, you know, if someone was being hired, kind of, if they got information, like the one, you know, database checks, if they were working for a primary employer and filling in for another employer, if they had a statement from that employer that was their primary employer, they didn't have to have new database checks run unless they ended up staying with the, you know, the other employer they were working for to fill in until after a certain date. So there are lots of dates involved in some of these that have to do with all of the things that occurred during COVID. Again, this is guidance for the issue with the SAM check. If you're doing database checks every 5 years, if you are using ARCS, still having to run a SAM check. And then we have all of the BCI information, clarification for all of those things during COVID. I'm not going to read through all of those. Like I said, you'll be getting this information, but all of the clarification of when background checks needed to be done, particularly if someone was working for 2 different agencies during that time frame. Entering stuff into RATBAC, when they needed to be, when staff need to be entered into RATBAC, again, during the COVID timeframe, when those timelines were. And the issue with staff needing high school diploma or not. You will notice the guidance at the bottom in yellow. This is still in effect. DSPs, you don't need to request a rule waiver. It's until further notice, until the department decides otherwise. You can still continue to employ DSPs who don't meet the education requirement until DODD says otherwise, unless that staff person is going to be administering medication and they have to have the high school diploma or GED, but otherwise it's until further notice. So unless we hear something from the department, you can continue to employ people without high school diploma or GED. And then this is explaining the CPR and first aid requirement. Anyone taking first aid and CPR after January of this year, that has to include the in-person skills demonstration. But anything that anyone has that they took between 3/13 of 20 and 12/31 of 21, it's acceptable for them not to have that in-person skills demonstration. But when they renew it at this point, they have to have the in-person skills demonstration. That's still very confusing for a lot of people. I've had to cite 2 providers recently because they took their training again this year and did the training that did not have an in-person skills demonstration. This is a licensed facility question and has to do with what initial training was required. And again, some of the stuff that was waived during COVID. So it has all of that listed out in the timeframes. There's a new question regarding volunteers. If your agency uses volunteers and they provide more than 40 hours of direct service during a calendar year, this is a list of the requirements that they have to meet and then guidance regarding that. So if you have people that meet that 40 hours in a calendar year, please pay attention to this new question. When I put this together, I did not have the question numbers, but it is under the personnel section, which is section 7, I believe, in the tool. Yes, it's section 7. And then this has to do with including volunteers in the written training plan. If you have the volunteers that provide more than 40 hours of service, they should be included as part of your written training and part of your written training plan. This is very similar to the question that was for licensed facilities, but it has to do with the training and things that were waived, and timeframes a little different for initial training during COVID. So make sure you look at the guidance for that, for what people had to complete, and the timelines of when they should have completed it during COVID and what was a little different. And then this is worded a little differently. They just changed the way the question was worded, but making sure that prior to providing direct services, that DSPs got their individual specific training regarding what's important to and important for the individual. Here's a new question regarding adult day service. And this never went away, but they took it out of the tool at one point, and now it's back in the tool, but it's regarding what training people doing day service are required to get, and that they're required to have a mentor and all the specific training that they're required to have. So it's been put back into the tool, basically. It was in there previously, and for some reason it went away, and now it's back. So it has all the information about what training is required for the day services. This is the revised requirements for annual training for DSPs, where the 2-hour training that includes the department provided curriculum, and then the 6 hours that the agency comes up with regarding MUI and UI, health and welfare alerts, and then the areas of components of quality care, positive behavior support, or health and safety. So it's got the revised requirements for training. So this is this question won't be answered if you have a review. It won't be answered until the beginning of next year, but the training should be in place this year to follow this requirement. And then this is training for the director of operations to have 2 hours of department provided training, and then 4 hours of training that the DOO selects based on things that, related to services provided or management of the agency. Again, it's based on the changes in the certification rule and the requirements for the DOO. This is remote monitoring, just a slight change in the question to put the word power into the question to make sure there's a backup power system in place. There's a few changes for independent questions. They mimic a lot of the things with the agency changes. For example, the first aid, which I already went over, first aid and CPR. The training changes, the 2 hours that DODD provides in My Learning, and then 6 hours selected by the provider in the components of quality care, positive behavior support, or health and safety. Again, training should be happening this year, and then it will be looked at for review starting January 1st of next year. Any questions on changes in the tool before I go through some information that's pretty recent on some of the common citations that providers are getting?
Robin,
Yes.
good to see you.
I know.
Quick question. Well, there were a couple things in there that actually were surprises to me, believe it or not. Will we be able to see this update somehow after this meeting?
I've given a copy of the PowerPoint to Amy.
Thank you so much. Great work. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else? Okay. These citations, I was in a training, I believe it's not quite 2 months ago now, that Office of System Support and Standards, which is the group that does compliance reviews, that I report to regarding reviews that I do. They gather all the information about what the most common review citations are. And this is where I got that information. So these are the most common citations for independent providers. It's regarding providers not being up to date on their annual training, which I find a lot in the reviews that I do. providers will say they didn't know they had to have their training every year. They know they have to have it like every 3 years because that's when their certifications due. But they don't know that they have to do it every single year. I hear that quite a bit, especially with newer providers. Documentation requirements are a citation that happens frequently because providers don't know what's required to be on their documentation. A lot of independent providers are not aware of the MUI analysis requirement or their requirement to have their UI logs and complete those monthly. Not doing not doing the services as written in the plan, not reviewing their UI log, and not keeping up with their first aid and CPR. So those are the most common for independents. A little bit larger list for agencies. Database checks are a big one. And a lot of times it's that the checks are not done in a timely manner. They're done after hire, or they're not being done within that 5-year time frame like they're supposed to be. RATBAC, staff not getting enrolled in RATBAC within the time frame that's required, within 14 days of hire or within 14 days of the receipt of the BCII by the provider. Attestation statements, that can either be the not having the correct attestation statement. The most recent one includes that in lieu of statement in it, where staff cannot get treatment or go to some type of program in lieu of conviction or something, so that something doesn't show up on their record, or they can't do that instead of that conviction. I ran across one of those just a couple weeks ago, where most of the staff had the correct statement, but for some reason one of the staff didn't. So that seems to be more than just staff not having them. BCI and FBI checks, a lot of it's that they're just not done prior to hire. Documentation requirements, staff not knowing what all needs to be on the documentation sheets. ISPs not being implemented as they should be. Internal compliance programs, not having those systems in place to make sure that all of those personnel things that need to happen, your database checks, your BCI checks, all of those things that need to be done within certain timeframes according to the rule, that they're not being done, that your documentation's not complete, that the billing's not being done correctly, that all of those pieces are not looked at, and you don't have a tight system in place to make sure that you're not having things that can get cited when you have a compliance review. That internal compliance program is what helps you know that you have a good tight system in place that is a quality check, so that that staff are doing what they're supposed to with the system. So then that is a foundation to build on doing quality services. So it's very important to make sure you have that internal compliance program in place to do that. Issues with initial training, issues with annual training, making sure you have that system in place to make sure those things are happening when they're supposed to. Having a UI policy. I see providers that have an MUI policy but don't realize they have to have their own UI policy and a system to make sure that UIs get reported to someone within their agency who is responsible to make sure everything happens correctly when an unusual incident occurs. And then personal funds, one of my favorite things, having that system of who makes sure that funds get used appropriately, get tracked appropriately, people have access to their funds like they're supposed to, and things get reconciled according to the rule, and people have what they need when they need it. And there's a good system in place for that. So those are some really, I mean, those are areas where there are lots of citations in those areas. So how can you maintain compliance when those are the issues that we see when we go out and do compliance reviews? Make sure you know the rules, make sure you know what the rules say and what your requirements are as a provider. Make sure you're doing those audits. Take the review tool and go through it and make sure that what you have in place fits what the rules say. That compliance tool can be your best friend to make sure you're doing things the way they're supposed to be done. You have access to it. It's on the DoDD website. It's available. It's in the compliance section on the website. Use that. Use the resources. You have your provider support people. You know, Amy's a good resource. If you work in other counties, every county in Southwestern Ohio has a provider person that can answer questions for you and help you and guide you to some resources. DoDD training is listed next. There's a whole section on provider resources. There's training, there's rule fact sheets, there's all kinds of information in there that is, it's a wealth of information that is extremely helpful. That can give you lots of good information. Go to, you know, you're attending this today, but every county has a provider meeting. A lot of them might do them. I don't know if anybody's doing them once a month these days, but you know, maybe every other month. They cover different things. You can gather a lot of really good information from those. And then do your checks and balances. Have your internal compliance program in place so that you know that you have a good system in place and you're not missing things. Because if you're missing a lot of stuff, you're going to end up just putting out fires and not having good processes in place so that you're not spending all your time when someone like me comes out and goes, oh, you have a problem here, you have a problem here, you have a problem here. You want to have those processes in place and so that they work so that you can spend your time doing what's really important, which is doing service for people. You don't want to be, oh, this messed up because we didn't have this in place. You don't want to spend your time doing that stuff. You want to spend your time doing what's most important. So if you have those systems and you have them together, you can spend more time doing service for people, making sure people have good lives and doing the things that you need to be doing. There's part of the DOO orientation. I haven't looked at it lately, but there's a whole section on internal compliance that is a really good start for you to think about how you want to put your agency compliance program together and the things that you need to think about to get some systems in place to make things work for you. So use what DoDD is giving you to help you think about what needs to be in place and what works for your agency. Here's some information. I'm not really going to go over it, but think about some of the things that, you know, you need to do for making sure you have stuff the way it needs to be when you're hiring people. little red information down there at the bottom, always check the rules to make sure you're completing everything that needs to be required. Don't rely on something that you got from someone else, because it could be 5 years old and rules change all the time. Questions?
Sorry, I just want to take you back a little bit to the first part that you were talking about for like the conditions or the whatever that came with COVID, that people do not have to do the CPR online. So if they have done it online now, do we go back to make them go in person?
If they did it without having an in-person skills test during COVID, that is fine. It's when they do their next training, anytime after January of this year, they have to do it with in-person skills test.
Oh, okay. Because I still have people who like, I can do it online, so we just don't have to do online normal.
Any training that they did after January 1st of this year,
They have to redo it.
they have to have done, they can do the classroom portion online, but it has to have been done with an in-person skills test. Like they can do the classroom portion can totally be done online, but it has to be in partner with, like, the way that the class is set up. They do the classroom part online, and then it should have a piece where they can then meet up with someone to do the in-person skills test.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Anything after January 1st of this year.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Anyone else? All right. I guess I'm done then, Amy. It's up to you.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it. I know a lot of the questions that I typically get will be annual trainings. Again, there's UI logs, MUI annual analysis, a lot of the kind of top site stuff you listed. Again, anytime you guys have any questions on any of that, I'm happy to help. And we got a lot of great resources. We've got some templates we can hand out. So reach out anytime. Does anyone have any other kind of just general questions or anything they want to talk about?
Maybe not a question, but I don't know if, because I really want to understand ARCS, ARCS, the one that we're using, because when you say change to a permanent employee, because every time you say hire, I don't know where to go to find where the employee has gone to, so it's almost like after you do that, it just disappears. So I don't know if there's any way, I don't know of any way of getting help through on using that app.
Yeah, I can. Robin, do you have any resources for that? If not, I can look that up and send that over to you.
I have the old, it's an older, like, instruction manual. But I don't know if it's been updated since the one I downloaded. Because yeah, once everything clears and their BCI clears and you're like hiring them, you are supposed to change them to a permanent employee, but I don't know. I don't use ARCS, so I don't know enough about it to know.
I just don't know where they go, because when I try to look them up, I can't find them. That's my problem.
Yeah, if I used it, I could probably help you, but I don't actually use it.
Yeah, I'll look that up and try to find some resources and send to you, Rose, for that. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, if there is nothing else, I just wanted to say thanks again for being with us. And it's that type of season. I have to say, have a warm and happy holiday season. And again, our next meeting will be January 18th. Again, that's 10 a.m. So we're switching that time around a little. So January 18th, 10 a.m. We'll get those reminders out a few weeks prior to that. And feel free to reach out anytime if you guys need anything at all, we're here to help. So with that, thank you so much for being with us and enjoy the rest of your day.